What if I told you that behind the charming streets of Salem, Massachusetts, a town known for its history and quaint beauty, there lay a scandal so shocking it defied comprehension, a secret affair that should never have happened, a bond that twisted love into obsession, and a gruesome murder that left a community shattered. This is not a work of fiction, it's a tale as real as the streets you walk on. Stay with me as we peel back the layers of this chilling story. A story that begins with the promise of sanctuary and family, but ends in tragedy so dark it will leave you questioning the limits of love and morality. And let me assure you, the way this story unfolds will keep you on the edge of your seat. You'll never guess how it all ends. Welcome to Salem, Massachusetts. This picturesque town, with its historic charm and peaceful atmosphere, is a place where the past seems to linger in every cobblestone street and colonial home. Known for its rich history and quaint beauty, Salem has long been a haven for those seeking a quiet life. Neatly trimmed lawns line the streets, and neighbors wave warmly as they pass each other by. It's the kind of town where everyone knows your name and your business, or so they think. But even the most serene towns have their secrets. And in Salem, a secret was brewing behind closed doors that would soon shock the nation. In the heart of this community stood a charming home belonging to Eleanor Gray. Eleanor was a 70-year-old widow, known for her generosity and warmth. Her garden, always in full bloom, was a reflection of her nurturing spirit. To the outside world, she was a pillar of kindness and resilience. But as we would later learn, appearances can be deceiving. Eleanor's life took a turn when her grandson, 16-year-old Noah Gray, came to live with her. Noah's arrival was meant to be a new beginning for the troubled teenager. His parents had recently gone through a messy divorce, and his father, unable to cope with the aftermath, thought that sending Noah to live in Salem might provide the stability he needed. At first, everything seemed fine. Noah was quiet and reserved, a stark contrast to Eleanor's lively presence. Neighbors noticed them gardening together, walking through the town's scenic paths, and sharing what appeared to be a close bond. But as time went on, small cracks began to appear. Neighbors reported hearing raised voices coming from Eleanor's home late at night. Noah, who initially seemed like a typical teenager adjusting to a new life, began showing signs of withdrawal. At school, he avoided his peers and often seemed lost in thought. His teachers noted a growing darkness in his demeanor, an anger simmering just beneath the surface. Meanwhile, Eleanor, once the cheerful face of her neighborhood, started to retreat from her daily routines. The vibrant flowers in her garden began to wither, a subtle reflection of the tension growing within her household. The relationship between Eleanor and Noah, which had once seemed like a lifeline for both, began to raise questions. Friends and neighbors couldn't quite put their finger on it, but something about their dynamic felt off. It wasn't just the arguments or Noah's increasingly erratic behavior. It was the way they interacted. Too close at times, yet inexplicably distant at others. As whispers spread through the tight-knit community, no one could have imagined just how dark this story would become. Behind the doors of that charming Salem home, secrets were festering. Secrets that would culminate in a tragedy so shocking it would forever change the way this town was seen. This is the story of Eleanor Gray, Noah Gray, and the unspeakable events that unfolded in the shadows of their lives. As weeks turned into months, the calm exterior of Eleanor Gray's home in Salem, Massachusetts, began to crack. What had once been a warm, inviting space, with its perfectly tended garden and cheery decor, started to take on an air of unease. Neighbors who were accustomed to seeing Eleanor greeting them with a smile and a wave began noticing strange and unsettling changes in the household. It started subtly at first. Eleanor became less visible in the neighborhood. She stopped tending to her beloved garden, the flowers wilting under an uncharacteristic neglect. Neighbors who attempted to check in on her were met with curt responses or were ignored altogether. Then there were the noises, sounds that sent chills down the spines of those who lived nearby. Late at night, muffled shouting or even the occasional scream could be heard coming from the Gray residence. These sounds, sudden and fleeting, were impossible to ignore. But it wasn't just Eleanor who seemed different. Noah, the quiet, reserved teenager who had come to Salem for a fresh start, was beginning to unravel in full view of the community. At school, teachers noted his increasing isolation and bouts of anger. He avoided making eye contact, spoke in clipped sentences, and on more than one occasion, stormed out of class without explanation. His peers, once curious about the newcomer, began to distance themselves from him, unnerved by his intense demeanor. Back in the neighborhood, things grew even stranger. The gray house seemed to come alive with inexplicable activity. Lights flickered on and off at odd hours. Shadows could be seen moving behind the curtains, their shapes distorted and unnatural. Some neighbors claimed to have heard whispers, low, unintelligible murmurs, emanating from the house, even when it appeared empty. These events, combined with Eleanor's withdrawal and Noah's erratic behavior, left the community on edge. Speculation ran wild, with theories ranging from the mundane to the macabre. Was this simply a case of a family struggling to cope with their past? Some believed that Noah, burdened by his parents' messy divorce and the move to a new town, was battling severe mental health issues. His behavior, they reasoned, was the natural result of a teenager grappling with unresolved trauma. But others weren't so sure. They pointed to Eleanor's own changes, her sudden reclusiveness, and the way she seemed to fade into the shadows of her own home. Could it be that Eleanor was hiding something? Then there were the more sinister theories. Some neighbors whispered about the possibility of abuse, that perhaps Eleanor and Noah's relationship wasn't as wholesome as it seemed. Others suggested that the strange occurrences in the house pointed to something even darker, something supernatural. After all, Salem had a history steeped in tales of the occult, and for some it wasn't hard to imagine that the gray house had become a site of some dark influence. As the rumors swirled, the tension in the community grew. People avoided walking near the gray residence after dark, their imaginations running wild with the possibilities of what might be happening behind those closed doors. And yet, despite all the speculation, no one could have predicted the horrifying truth that would soon come to light. What was happening inside the gray house? Was it simply the strain of family troubles, or something far more sinister at play? These questions would haunt the town of Salem, but the answers, when they finally came, would be more shocking than anyone could have imagined. It was a stormy October evening in Salem, Massachusetts, when Eleanor Gray seemed to vanish into thin air. The once lively 70-year-old widow, whose presence had brightened the community, was suddenly nowhere to be found. Days turned into nights, and the shadows around the Gray residence seemed to grow darker. Concern rippled through the neighborhood as whispers of Eleanor's disappearance began to spread. Yet no one could have anticipated the horror waiting to be uncovered. Eleanor's best friend, Linda Carter, was among the first to notice her absence. Concerned after several unanswered calls and no response at the door, Linda decided to take matters into her own hands. The evening was cold, with rain tapping incessantly on her umbrella as she approached the gray house. The sense of unease that had been simmering in the neighborhood seemed to intensify as she stood before the door. The handle turned under her hand, and to her surprise it was unlocked. Stepping inside, Linda immediately felt an oppressive heaviness in the air. The house was eerily silent except for the distant sound of rain against the windows. As she moved through the dimly lit hallway, the smell hit her, a foul, metallic scent that sent shivers down her spine. Calling out for Eleanor, her voice echoed back at her, unanswered. With every step she took, the dread in her chest grew heavier. When Linda reached the living room, she stopped in her tracks, gasping in horror. The scene before her was something out of a nightmare. Furniture was overturned, as if a violent struggle had taken place. Books and personal belongings lay scattered across the floor, but it was the center of the room that held the most chilling sight. There, amidst the chaos, lay Eleanor Gray's body. It was a gruesome sight, her mutilated form surrounded by what appeared to be ritualistic symbols drawn in blood. Linda's scream pierced the night, summoning neighbors who had already been on edge. Soon the police arrived, but even seasoned officers were unprepared for what they found. The symbols covering the floor and walls were unlike anything they had seen before, intricate and ominous, as though they carried a meaning that eluded understanding. The scene felt less like a crime scene and more like a portal to something sinister. As investigators began their work, another discovery deepened the mystery. Among the disarray, they found Noah Gray's journal. The entries within were chilling, filled with cryptic references to voices he claimed to hear and shadows he swore were watching him. Noah wrote of vivid, terrifying dreams where he saw his grandmother as something monstrous, her face twisted in ways he couldn't comprehend. The most alarming entries spoke of an overwhelming urge to cleanse the house of its darkness. What did he mean by this? And how did these disturbing writings connect to the horrific scene before them? The investigators' minds raced with questions. Was this a case of random violence? The work of a deranged outsider? Or had something far more sinister and personal taken place within the Gray household? The symbols, the journal, and the eerie whispers surrounding the house painted a picture of events that defied logic. The calm streets of Salem, once filled with charm and history, now seemed cloaked in an impenetrable fog of fear and speculation. As the investigation unfolded, the people of Salem found themselves grappling with an unsettling reality. The disappearance of Eleanor Gray was no random tragedy. It was the beginning of a mystery that would plunge the entire community into darkness. What were those symbols? Who or what was responsible for this unimaginable act? And perhaps most chilling of all, was Noah Gray a victim of his own unraveling mind or a key player in a tragedy far darker than anyone could imagine? Stay with us as we delve deeper into this haunting case, uncovering the secrets hidden within the walls of the Gray residence and the mind of the troubled teenager who called it home. The answers to these questions are as disturbing as the crime itself. The investigation into Eleanor Gray's brutal murder took a harrowing turn as detectives pieced together the fragments of evidence scattered throughout her Salem home. What initially appeared to be a senseless act of violence began to reveal layers of complexity and darkness that no one could have foreseen. As the story unfolded, a shocking truth emerged, one that would leave even seasoned investigators reeling. The breakthrough came when police uncovered a series of letters exchanged between Eleanor and her grandson, Noah Gray. These letters, written in Eleanor's elegant yet trembling handwriting and Noah's erratic scrawl, revealed the unimaginable. Their relationship had crossed the boundaries of familial love, becoming something forbidden and deeply disturbing. Eleanor's words were filled with longing and obsession, while Noah's responses oscillated between confusion, resentment, and guilt. Eleanor's diaries, discovered in a locked drawer in her bedroom, painted an even darker picture. Page after page detailed her growing fixation on Noah, a fixation she described as both uncontrollable and torturous. She wrote of her belief that their connection was fated, a bond that defied societal norms. But alongside these confessions were entries filled with paranoia and fear. Eleanor wrote about shadows that seemed to follow her and voices that whispered warnings in the dead of night. She described strange rituals she performed to cleanse Noah of what she believed were dark forces consuming him. The rituals themselves became a focal point of the investigation. Police found evidence of these ceremonies scattered throughout the house. Melted candles arranged in peculiar patterns, ash-stained symbols etched into the floorboards, and a collection of ancient texts with passages highlighted in Eleanor's handwriting. Forensic analysis confirmed that the blood used to draw the symbols found at the crime scene belonged to both Eleanor and Noah, further deepening the mystery of what had transpired in those final moments. Noah's journal, recovered from the cluttered living room, provided another piece of the puzzle. His entries were disjointed and haunting, filled with vivid descriptions of nightmares and hallucinations. He wrote of seeing his grandmother's face transform into something monstrous, of hearing voices that told him to flee or to fight. The most chilling entries, however, were those in which Noah described feeling trapped both by the house and by Eleanor. He wrote about his desperate need to escape her influence, calling her presence both comforting and suffocating. One entry read, "I love her, but I fear her. I have to break free before it's too late." As detectives sifted through this disturbing collection of evidence, the question of Noah's involvement became impossible to ignore. The forensic team uncovered fingerprints and traces of Noah's DNA on the knife used to kill Eleanor. The crime scene itself bore signs of a violent struggle, with overturned furniture and broken glass, suggesting a final desperate confrontation. But was this a premeditated act, or the breaking point of a young man pushed to his limits by manipulation and psychological torment? Neighbors were interviewed extensively, and their accounts only added to the complexity of the case. Some described seeing Noah wandering the yard late at night, muttering to himself or standing motionless beneath the trees. Others spoke of Eleanor's increasingly erratic behavior, noting that she had become withdrawn and seemed perpetually on edge. One neighbor recounted hearing Eleanor tell Noah that they were chosen, though the meaning of this statement remains unclear to this day. In the courtroom, the revelation stunned everyone present. The prosecution painted Noah as a cold-blooded killer, arguing that he had planned the murder to free himself from Eleanor's control. They pointed to his journal entries, the letters, and the physical evidence as proof of his intent. The defense, however, presented a different narrative. They described Noah as a victim, a troubled teenager who had been manipulated and emotionally abused by his grandmother. They argued that Eleanor's obsession and the rituals she conducted had pushed Noah to a breaking point, leaving him incapable of rational thought. Ultimately, the question at the heart of the case was this: was Noah Gray a victim or a perpetrator? The evidence suggested that he was both, a young man caught in a web of obsession, manipulation, and mental illness. The truth of what happened in the Gray household may never be fully understood, but the impact of this case continues to haunt the town of Salem, leaving a dark stain on its storied history. When the verdict was finally announced, the small town of Salem, Massachusetts, was left divided. Noah Gray was found guilty of Eleanor Gray's brutal murder. However, rather than being sentenced to prison, the court mandated his commitment to a psychiatric facility. The decision was made after extensive testimony from mental health professionals, who argued that Noah's actions were the result of severe psychological instability exacerbated by Eleanor's overwhelming influence. For some, this outcome felt like justice. For others, it was a travesty. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense. Prosecutors had painted Noah as a calculating murderer, driven by a desperate need to free himself from his grandmother's control. They pointed to the physical evidence, his fingerprints on the murder weapon, the journal entries detailing his growing resentment, and his repeated claims of hearing voices urging him to act. The prosecution argued that Noah had planned the crime, viewing it as his only way out of a toxic and abusive relationship. The defense, however, presented a deeply human and tragic narrative. They described Noah as a victim, a boy thrust into an unimaginable situation. The defense team emphasized Eleanor's role, highlighting her obsessive behavior and the strange rituals she performed in her attempt to cleanse Noah. They painted a picture of a teenager trapped in a web of manipulation, unable to escape the psychological torment inflicted by someone he once trusted. They argued that the crime was not premeditated but rather the tragic result of a young mind breaking under pressure. The community's reaction to the verdict was just as conflicted. Some residents viewed Noah as a victim, a boy who had been pushed to the edge by circumstances beyond his control. They believed the court's decision to send him to a psychiatric facility was the right one, giving him a chance to heal and perhaps one day reintegrate into society. Others, however, were outraged. They saw Noah as a dangerous individual who had committed an unspeakable act and felt that a psychiatric sentence was too lenient for such a heinous crime. The Gray House, once a symbol of charm and warmth, became a grim reminder of the tragedy that had unfolded within its walls. Neighbors reported feeling uneasy as they passed by, some even claiming that the house seemed different, darker, colder, as if it bore the weight of the events that had transpired. Stories began to circulate, with some neighbors insisting they could still hear whispers at night or see faint lights flickering in the windows. Whether these accounts were rooted in reality or fueled by fear, they only deepened the town's unease. As for Noah, his time in the psychiatric facility was marked by ongoing struggles. Reports indicated that he continued to experience vivid nightmares and claimed to hear the same voices that had haunted him before the murder. He spoke of shadows and an oppressive presence that he believed still followed him. Doctors worked tirelessly to understand the depths of his trauma, but progress was slow. Noah's case became a focal point for discussions about mental health, family dynamics, and the fine line between victimhood and culpability. In Salem, the aftermath of the case left a lasting impact. The community, once tight-knit and welcoming, became fractured. People were more cautious, more hesitant to trust their neighbors. The tragedy of Eleanor and Noah Gray became a part of the town's lore, a cautionary tale whispered in hushed tones. It served as a grim reminder that even the most picturesque towns could harbor dark and unthinkable secrets. This case also raised larger questions that extended beyond Salem. Was Noah truly a victim of his grandmother's manipulations, or should he bear full responsibility for his actions? Could the strange symbols and voices he described be dismissed as mere products of a disturbed mind? Or did they hint at something more sinister, something that defied logical explanation? In the end, the story of Eleanor and Noah Gray leaves us with more questions than answers. It is a chilling exploration of the complexities of human relationships, the impact of mental illness, and the devastating consequences of secrets left unchecked. What do you think? Was justice served, or does this case highlight the limitations of our legal and mental health systems? Let us know your thoughts, and thank you for joining us as we uncovered the haunting tale of the Gray family. Until next time, stay curious, stay vigilant, and remember, sometimes the darkest secrets are hidden in plain sight. As we close this chapter on the tragic and deeply unsettling story of Eleanor and Noah Gray, we are left with more questions than answers. The haunting events that unfolded in Salem, Massachusetts, have sparked debates and discussions that continue to this day. Was Noah a victim, manipulated by his grandmother's obsessive influence, or was he fully aware of his actions and their devastating consequences? Did the strange symbols and voices point to a deeper, more sinister force at play, or were they manifestations of a mind unraveling under immense pressure? This story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about the fragility of human relationships, the complexities of mental health, and the hidden struggles that can exist behind closed doors. It reminds us that beneath even the most serene exteriors can lie untold pain and unimaginable secrets. But now we turn to you. What are your thoughts on this case? Do you believe justice was served, or do you feel that there is more to this story than we may ever fully understand? Share your perspective in the comments below. Let's keep the conversation going because your voice matters in uncovering the many layers of this tragic tale. And if stories like this captivate you as much as they do us, make sure to join our growing community. Hit that like button, subscribe to our channel, and click the notification bell so you never miss an episode. Together we will continue to explore the darkest corners of true crime, bringing to light the stories that demand to be told. Thank you for watching, and remember to stay curious, stay vigilant, and always question the world around you.